Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box, the show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love the challenge of status quo. And I am your host, Pete Caliendo. How you doing, everybody in the U.S. and around the world? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sticking with us. Over 100 countries. We are thrilled that we continue to give you as much baseball details as we can. And before we start, don't forget, special thanks to SIS Ltd, my Japanese buddies over 25 years. Go to info@s/is.co.jp, but easier than that, go to Caliendo Sports International, check it out, the baseball podcast, and our sponsor will be there. They are an IT business that handle a lot of clients in the US and around the world. I've known them for 25 years, fantastic people. They will do a great job for you. So check them out. Thanks for them for being one of our sponsors. Really appreciate it. Helps us get out. And don't forget, go to CaliendoSportsInternational.com, check out all our trips. And last thing, Baseball for Good, ISG Baseball, nonprofit organizations that I am with. All our money goes to helping baseball around the world. And one of the biggest projects we have coming up here in May, we are taking 45 Ukrainian players, 15U, baseball and softball, from Ukraine, sponsoring the complete trip. So far, everything's good. We got to get them out of there with a bus. There'll be 45 players and coaches. Go to Little League Complex in Krutno, Poland. I will meet them there. We got a lot of great things. We got an opening ceremony. We've got great things happening, practices, games, excitement. Get them away from what's going on in the mess in Ukraine. We're praying for everybody in Ukraine all the time. So again, thanks folks for your support. If you're interested, just email me. You're interested in helping even financially, caliendo19@gmail.com. I will put that on the show notes and then get a hold of you right away. Don't forget, check us out on Spotify and all the social networks. And now let's get going. Another great show and another great guest, Kevin Graber. He is the Chicago Cubs minor league field coordinator. And what a great baseball background. I'm not going to go through all his history, but he's been a part-time scout with the Yankees. It was with the Phillies Academy. Hey, 13 years varsity baseball coach. He's won 5 New England League championships, played indie ball, played in Australia. I'm going through this Cape Cod League he's coached in. He was with the Phillies in the New York Collegiate Baseball League, 2-time ABCA Northeast Regional Coach of the Year. And we just keep going on and on. I'll get into some other things that he's done. He's also the base writing coordinator. Let's not waste any time because he's spending time from spring training. And I believe he's also going to be the manager for the Arizona Cubs there, the rookie level affiliate team. We'll talk to him and I'll ask him about that. Kevin, what's up, buddy? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Pete, thank you so much for having me. I've admired you for a while on social media. I feel like we already know each other and we're already friends.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. We've been trying to get you on for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden I got all kinds of problems, right? I moved to Charlotte. Everything's great. But then all of a sudden I got root canal, and then I get food poisoning. And then it's just like, it's those stumbling blocks of life, right? That we got to go through and we got to knock them down, get back up and keep going.
Well, Pete, I have admired you from afar, the way that you have dedicated yourself to the game, the way that you have dedicated yourself to growing the game internationally, bringing it to new audiences, bringing it to new kids, spreading the word about baseball, the places you've been, the countries that you've been affiliated with, the people that you've touched. Man, it's really impressive.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I get goosebumps when I hear that. So thank you. And mention, how about this one? Here you are, you've been in the game a long time, all these things that you've done now, with high school, college, pro ball, collegiate baseball, and then all of a sudden, here you are, you get the opportunity. I'm a Chicago kid. I didn't want to leave Chicago, but you get older, you want to relax a little bit, slow down that pace. So went to Charlotte just in August, enjoying it here. But I do miss my friends in Chicago. David Ross played for us when he was 15, 16 years old. Obviously, I watch the Cubs all the time. I love daytime baseball. Here you are. You have, in my opinion, a dream job. Man, talk about, the journey of all this, because, I mentioned a few things here of what you've done in the game, but there's a whole lot more. All that accumulated to now being the Cubs minor league field coordinator. Talk about your journey.
Yeah, I'll just give you a little bit of a Spark Notes version of my journey. There's a lot to it, but I've gotten pretty good at telling it in a succinct fashion. Long story short, when I was a senior in college playing baseball at the College of St. Rose in my hometown of Albany, New York, I was diagnosed with lymphoma in May of 1992. So
Wow.
a large grapefruit-sized tumor in my chest. And I had been playing my entire senior season with that. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I know I didn't feel well. I collapsed on the field during the conference playoffs that season, and it was right to the emergency room, and I got my diagnosis, and it was surgeries and ICU and chemotherapy and radiation and everything that comes along with a lymphoma cancer diagnosis. It was difficult, I had to recover from all that, but one thing that I did is during my recovery, I coached American Legion baseball in Scotia, New York, which is a suburb of Schenectady. I was 21. The players I was coaching were 18 and 19. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I felt a calling to do that. From there, I took a coaching job at Lassen College in Susanville, California, which is a California junior college. So I packed up my Plymouth Sundance and I drove, 3,000 miles from Albany, New York to California, sight unseen, for my first paid coaching job. And when I say paid, we're talking like I made $2,000 for the entire year.
Yeah.
After that year coaching California junior college baseball, I started my own college summer league team in the Mountains Collegiate Baseball League called the Electric City Giants. And basically what I did is I collected California junior college players and I brought them back with me that summer to upstate New York. And I had them all living in my mom's basement. And we took that league by storm. We played this California junior college style of baseball. I was the coach of the year. And it was a fun experience. After that, I started to feel better and healthy, and I got the itch to play again. And I talked my way into an opportunity to play overseas in Australia. I played club baseball over in Australia, played pretty well. Talked my way into getting some opportunities to play independent ball here in the US. First independent team I latched on with was the Southern Minnesota Stars in Austin, Minnesota. Got to play with them, had a couple good years. Unfortunately, I had another health setback, not back to square one with the cancer, but enough of a return that I had to sort of stop playing. But a fortunate thing happened is I got an opportunity to manage in independent professional baseball. So at the time I was the youngest manager in all of professional baseball. And
For who?
yeah, I managed the Southern Minnesota Stars in the Prairie League, and then I hired on to manage the Adirondack Lumberjacks in Glens Falls, New York, in the Northeast.
Absolutely. Know it well.
So I was having a good run. Then my wife and I had our first child, Katie, and I decided that it was, that life was great, but it wasn't conducive to being a great parent. So I segued to the college ranks. Then we ended up at the University of West Alabama in Livingston, Alabama, not far from Meridian, Mississippi.
Wow, that's a jump from the East Coast to Alabama. Talk about a culture shock.
Well, one thing you'll find in my story is I've never been afraid to go where the opportunity is. I've had so many people in my hometown, when I go home for a high school reunion or a wedding or something fun like that, they'll say, KG, everybody calls me KG, even my mom. They'll say, KG, you're so lucky. Like, how do you get all these opportunities? You're so lucky. These things all fall into your lap. I'm like, lucky? Man, I go where the opportunity is. Like, I went to Australia. I drove my piece of junk Plymouth Sundance to California for a coaching job. I went to Minnesota, Alabama. So sometimes it's not luck. It's about embracing the opportunities where they are and not being worried about, if they don't bring a huge paycheck with them. You follow your passion. That'll take care of it a little bit later.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I want you to continue. But the reason I say that is because there's so many young people out there, and especially nowadays. I know there's different type of individuals out there with different type of motivations, but what you just brought up, that commitment, that willing to go anywhere you have to go, or even, I remember even when I started, and I don't want to go back and say, geez, I walked 100 miles, with no shoes and all that, like some people might be talking about, but like I remember being in Thunder Bay, my first job in independent ball, my check went to my mortgage back home. So I didn't even see my check. It went straight there. And you have to make those commitments, don't you? I mean, the little sacrifices. And I think the great comment, go where you need to go. I love that, because when you do that, man, many things can happen.
Even this opportunity with the Cubs, it required moving my family from the Boston area to Arizona, which is literally across the country. And I was like, cool, we'll be there. Wow. I think they were kind of amazed at how little I required to do this. I was very low maintenance. I was like, all right, when do you need me there? We'll be there. And we just kind of figured it out. But
that takes your family. Sorry to interrupt, but that takes your family too. I mean, there's a commitment there from your family. Like you said, for your wife, your kids. Arizona's a beautiful place to go to, no doubt about it. I wouldn't mind that move either. but it still takes that, that moving's not easy, and I mean, it takes your wife to support you 100%. I mean, it takes a lot of people behind you to help you.
Yeah, I spent 13 years as a high school coach at Phillips Academy Andover in Andover, Massachusetts, and I had some opportunities to do some cool stuff, job opportunities to kind of move on up while we were there. But we stayed put because our kids were in middle school and then they were in high school, and we wanted them to have that stability. But, lo and behold, in the year 2022, 2023, our daughter Katie is a college graduate. She lives in Tampa, Florida. Our son Kyle's a junior in college. Our daughter Kelly's a sophomore in college, and they're adults. So when this opportunity with the Cubs came up, we had a family conversation, and I asked the kids if they'd be cool with this, and they were like, "You have to do this." Yeah. So those boxes being checked were the first things that had to fall into place for us to make this move as a family. So thankfully, I have a lovely supportive wife, Tina, and our 3 kids have been great. But back to the trajectory I was on. Ended up at the University of West Alabama. From there, I got my wife a little bit closer to home. She's from Albany, New York as well. I took a job at Amherst College. And when I got to Amherst College, I actually was out of coach. I intentionally took a break from coaching. I arrived as the equivalent of an assistant athletic director, more in athletics administration. And Pete, we were at the town fair, the town carnival in Amherst, Massachusetts. I hadn't been on the field coaching in a couple of years, and I was behind a guy in the cotton candy line who had a jacket on that said Amherst Little League. And this guy's clearly, had some mileage on him. Sure. I said, "Hey, you involved in baseball here in the town?" He's like, "Yeah, I run everything. I run the American Legion program. I run the Mickey Mantle program, the Little League, the Babe Ruth." And he looked at me and he's like, "Are you a baseball guy? Do you want to coach our Mickey Mantle team?" And I was like, "What's Mickey Mantle?" I had no idea. He's like, it's the 15U. So it's 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds. And I was like, "Well, what's it pay?" He's like, "Nothing." I was like, "Okay, I'll do it.
I'll take it."
And that was literally my entry back into baseball. And so I coached that summer, and the following summer, I actually coached that team to a Massachusetts state championship. That out of nowhere, we just took this ragtag bunch of kids and put them on the field and coached them up as a college coach would. And we ended up making this dramatic Cinderella run to a state championship. But then, the passion was rekindled, the flame was lit, and then I got back on the field with the program at Amherst College with their baseball staff, and that was great. And then all the while, I was getting my master's degree in education with a concentration in English at the University of Massachusetts down the road. And when I got that graduate degree, I parlayed that into the opportunity to join the faculty at Phillips Academy Andover, which is the most selective, the most prestigious independent school in the country. It's like the Harvard or Yale of high schools. It's a boarding school. So the students there live on campus. The faculty live on campus as well. There's 1,200 students, give or take, from 50 states and 46 countries. A lot of faculty and faculty families that live on campus with the students there as well. And we did that for 13 years. And while I was there, I built this baseball program that gradually ascended to kind of national power. While doing that, I developed a passion for base running as well, specifically base stealing. And I started presenting at coaches conventions. The crowning achievement presenting at the coaches conventions was I got on the main stage at the American Baseball Coaches Association National Convention in 2022 in Chicago. And man,
yep, I remember that. That's the highlight, man. Yeah, that was awesome. I mean,
it's terrifying because 6,000 coaches register for that.
Yep.
But man, I prepared like Rocky Balboa getting ready to fight Ivan Drago in Rocky 5. Man, I got on that stage and I just, people tell me I killed it. And that just,
and they were right.
Yeah, thank you. And that opened up some doors, man. I started getting some calls from some big league organizations. The Cubs were one of them. And that sort of is a little bit of how I ended up where I am today, working for the Chicago Cubs.
And I want to say, folks, everybody not only has, Kevin spoken at the ABCA, but also the World Baseball Coaches Conference and USA Baseball also he's spoken for. If you're on Facebook, you got any questions, for Kevin, just type them in the comments section. Look like we have a lot of people. Thank you. I say Chip Carey, good friend. I've been on the show before. Great announcer, one of the best announcers in my opinion. Great voice, knows the game of baseball. Welcome, Chip. Thanks for joining us. He always jumps on. He loves baseball, man. One of the best guys I've ever met. But listen, the part here that I'm interested in also is here you are, okay, high school, college, Mickey Mantle, all these different baseball associations. Now you got to go to pro ball, big jump. And not only pro ball, you're not starting as a coach, assistant coach, or you're starting here as, I believe you're coming in as the, the field coordinator. What was that like, the adjustment? I mean, I met my first time in professional baseball was indie ball. Okay. So we had AAA guys, AA guys, sometimes some big league guys, former guys. I was scared, man. It was like, I've never done this before, but then things changed for me within a couple of weeks. What was it like for you?
Well, my trajectory here has been an interesting one. I hired on, my first day was November 1st. I drove out here by myself. My family was still back in the Boston area. I arrived on Halloween night and I started the next day, November 1st.
Wow.
My initial job title was complex coordinator, and I was going to be the complex coordinator, which was a new position in the organization, and also manage the Cubs rookie league team here in Arizona. It's called what's called the Arizona Complex League. What happened though is while I was driving out here, the Cubs field coordinator, Dustin Kelly, was elevated to big league hitting coach. And all of a sudden the organization was without a field coordinator. So I arrived and I started doing my thing as the complex coordinator. And one thing about me is, in addition to baseball, I've always done a lot of other things. When I was at Phillips Academy Andover, in addition to coaching the baseball program, I was the senior associate director of admission. I taught classes. I ran a dorm. I was an academic advisor. I volunteered to serve on every committee you could possibly think of. Anything the school needed, I did it. And so I'm really capable administratively, in addition to, being a baseball guy, which is a little bit unique, I think, for some. And so I think what the Cubs saw is someone that was capable both on the field and also, organizationally in that way. The job of the field coordinator is a big one. You run minor league spring training. And so the major responsibilities include, setting the schedule for what happens on all four baseball diamonds every day. And you put that schedule out and it goes to everybody in the organization. Then you got to make sure it's happening the way it's supposed to be happening. And you got to make sure the hitting department is happy, the pitching department is happy, strength and conditioning, medical, all the minor league managers who are here. It's a big, big job. I get to lead a staff meeting with about 60 coaches every morning in our theater here at the spring training complex. And
Wow.
yeah, it's a big change. It's thinking of the fact that I was a high school coach at this time last year, and now I'm in a position of influence with, one of the marquee professional sports organizations in the world. It's kind of like,
Absolutely.
life is crazy, ain't it, Pete?
Oh, wow. And to see that Cubs logo, I've seen it for all my whole life, and then it's all over the world. Now you got two things you had to do. I would assume, again, I'm assuming here, you're gonna tell us, Kevin. One, you've got to address at the beginning, I would assume, all the coaches, your very first time. And then you got to address all the players in a minor league system, right? There's got to be a time you introduce yourself and lay out the plans and all that. Take us through kind of a little bit, both of those, how that was. And I mean, again, even with all your experience, I'd be nervous as anything, man. I mean, I don't think you're not nervous. I don't think you're human, but take us through that. I'd love to hear that part.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about it. I'm 53 years old now. And in terms of embracing this, I mean, I could have stayed at Phillips Academy Andover probably until I retired. I think they were pretty happy with me. I felt like I was doing a pretty good job. My family was pretty comfortable. But Pete, 53 years old, man, if I was going to do something like this, it felt like now or never.
Sure.
And so that was a big part of it. Like, I wanted to break free of my comfort zone. Like, I wanted to be in front of a group of people with my heart beating out of my chest. Like, I wanted to kind of feel alive in a way that maybe I hadn't felt alive in a while. And, nothing great is ever easy. And so this is definitely challenging. Just mustering up the strength to get in front of an amazing group of people every day with the Cubs organization. But, getting that first spring training under my belt, man, it feels like a great accomplishment. And I had some great people helping me out along the way. That's for sure.
What was that talk like let's take the coaches, your first talk to them?
Well, one thing that played in my favor is we actually had an organizational meeting in Chicago about a month before spring training. So literally the Cubs flew everybody to Wrigley Field in the entire organization. And we had these organizational meetings. And, I brought with me to the Cubs for the Cubs, a new base running philosophy. And I got to present to the entire organization, much like I did at the American Baseball Coaches Association convention, my take, my view, my theories on base stealing. And so I got to meet everybody in the organization at those organizational meetings at Wrigley Field. And I had been on stage in front of them. So it sort of, it demystified me, it demystified them for me. And so that was a nice primer. So it wasn't like I was getting on, in front of people from scratch who hadn't seen me or I hadn't met before. So that was really good.
Yeah, and presenting obviously what you did at the ABCA, that had to help a lot. I've got Wyatt Moore. Wyatt, I agree with you. Go where the opportunity is. He says he loves that comment. That's going to
Thank
be
you,
his
Ryan.
on shirts. You got to get that on shirts, right? And present them. How about to the players? Have like was there a time you had to talk to 100 and so many players? Would that sound like?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Cubs, I was part of a committee that formulated what we call our standards and expectations. And it's kind of like our core values for the organization, for how, how we expect players to operate. A lot of it is about, being about, the guy next to you rather than just yourself and your own trajectory through the organization. It's how we present ourselves on the field and off the field. It's, how it's our standards and expectations for behavior for everybody in the organization. And so, I had something substantial to present to the players rather than getting up there and trying to, invent something from scratch, which was really, really helpful. But, I've gotten really good over the years at sort of understanding what the core values of an organization are and embracing those and delivering those in a consumable fashion to, to a group of people. So that went pretty well with the players for that initial meeting.
And during minor league spring training, so you got all the instructions going on, you lay out the schedule, everything's working out. What's your main goal once things are rolling? Are just walking around, kind of observing and adding things? How does that work?
Yeah, requires a lot of communication. I want to make sure that the managers are getting enough time during the course of their practice day to get their fundamentals in. For instance, they got to get their bunt coverages in, their first and third defense, their cuts and relays, all the fundamentals that we all work on in baseball at every level. But got to make sure that they have time to do that throughout the course of their practice plan. Got to make sure that I'm on board with what the hitting group needs those hitters doing, whether it's cage hitting, whether it's on field for that day, whether they need to be in the lab, getting some some of that technology around them. The pitching guys, everything we do has to mesh with them. I think another part of this is we need to be in lockstep with what big league spring training is doing as well. We need to make sure that we're in sync with them both timing wise, we're not getting in their way. We have 4 minor league diamonds here at the spring training complex, and then we have 2 big league diamonds and the stadium. And so we got to make sure that we're out of their way in the hitting cages, we're out of their way in the weight room, we're out of the way on the fields, and that what we're doing meshes with what they're teaching at the big league level as well. So I work really closely with Andy Green, who's the big league bench coach for the Chicago Cubs as well. And I also got to work big league spring training in addition to running minor league spring training. So I pulled double duty, which was a really neat thing for me to experience as well.
Wow. Yeah, you might as well just pull out a cot there, right, and stay there. You might as well sleep there because that's what it sounded like you were doing.
No, I had some for 25 straight days, man. I had some 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. days.
But you know what? Think about it. Nothing against any other work, but it's baseball. You gotta love it. I mean, you got the passion for it, and as you know, when you're doing something you love, it's not work anymore.
Baseball for me is like pizza, Pete. The worst slice of pizza I ever had was still pizza, and it was still amazing. Yeah. The worst day I've ever had on the baseball field was still awesome.
Yes, I agree with you. That's fantastic. How about with coaches? Now you said you debrief. Do you debrief every day during spring training, and then they give their input and you make adjustments?
Yeah, and there's a morning staff meeting that I would run every day. Sort of the plan of the day, how the schedule is going to work. Deliver any announcements. Help them see what's coming down the pike. In the days to come in spring training. You have days when you don't have spring training games, and those are called camp days. So those are practice days. And then you have days that you do have spring training games, but you also have a workout in the morning before those happen. So just, making sure the trains are running on time and everybody, is forewarned with stuff that's coming down the pike. It just requires a lot of communication.
It's interesting in those meetings, you have coaches that might say, hey, Kevin, listen, we did this. Can we do this tomorrow? Make an adjustment here. How does that work?
Yeah, the coaches were very kind to me in the meetings. If there was something that wasn't to their liking, they weren't sort of raising their hand and like just blowing me up in front of the entire group. They were great about pulling me aside, say, hey man, I need more time for fundamentals, or hey, can we add this in, or this isn't working, or we had 2 groups of we had pitchers in the outfield and they're having line drives whizzing at their head while they're playing catch, man. Can we make so that's a little bit better? At the end of every day, you kind of sit there looking at the whiteboard and you're taking stock of, all right, what went well today and what did not go so well. And you just try to do better the next day.
And then on each field, obviously you've got a manager on each field. We're running the practices. They make the adjustments according to how things are rolling.
Yeah, and they do so according to work groups. So in spring training this year, we had 4 work groups to start, and then we added a 5th. So our work groups are for, our AAA affiliate, our AA affiliate, high A, low A, and then we have a rookie league work group as well. And those are subject to change. They're less about like who's going to play at the AA and the AAA level at the start, and more about where can we get players where they are getting repetitions and they can be seen. We might have a AAA type guy in a AA work group just because we want him to get out there and have space to do his thing, and not have to sort of fight other really good players for those repetitions, if that makes sense. So, sometimes the players get like freaked out looking at what work group they're in, and they read a lot into that, but
Sure.
it's not where you start. It's sort of where you finish, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. The other thing I'm interested in spring training is because going to spring training, watching spring training, looking at players in the older days. One of the things that I just, didn't like about it, that a lot of things just didn't seem real, game-like.
Yeah.
You go through the motions in some ways. Times have changed a little bit, haven't they? Talk about how you're kind of adapting to more game-like situations in spring training.
Yeah, well, we have a really expensive pitching machine in our organization called Traject, Trajekt. And, we have a hitting lab, and Traject is this new technology. It's a pitching machine in which it projects any major league pitcher you want onto a screen.
Wow.
And it's attached to a computer setup, and that computer factors in that pitcher's spin rate, arm angle, height of release, everything you can think of. And you get to have at-bats against Roger Clemens if you want, or Pedro Martinez, or any major league pitcher who's programmed into Traject. So yeah, there's a real appetite for making things game-like. We have a really great infield coordinator here as well, named Daidai Otaka, who's a young cat. He went to Yale University. I think Daidai's 22 years old, but he's a bit of a wizard.
Japanese?
He is from Detroit, but his parents are Japanese
descent. Yep.
Yeah. But one thing Daidai has brought to the organization is a lot of machine ground ball work, because fungos are great, old-fashioned fungos, but they sort of impart a real feel-good, easy spin for those infielders to field. And using the machines, we're really trying to replicate what an actual batted ball does. So that's another example. In our batting practices, we're doing live feel-good arm BP, and that's great. But we're also using a lot of machine stuff that replicates the velocity that you might get in a game. There's also a lot of live batting practices that happen as well, and that's great for our pitchers because they get to throw on a mound to hitters, but it's great for our hitters as well because they get to have live at bats versus actual pitchers. So that's a really good point, Pete, where it's a real point of emphasis in our organization to make things as game-like as they possibly can be.
Yeah, and I love that part because I think more and more, the more live BP, I know you got to do the regular BP to get loose and all that, as you mentioned, but then live BP helps a lot, I believe. And I've seen it with other, even younger organizations, colleges, high schools doing it more often now. Makes sense, right? As long as the players understand that, hey, you're going to get live BP. It's not going to be like regular. You might fail a little bit, but it's going to help you in the long run. You got to kind of sell that, I would assume.
Yeah, and one thing that I did this year as the base running coordinator is I added a base running group to the live BPs as well.
Oh, nice.
So, if there's a pitcher on the mound in these live BPs and he's pitching from the set, we're timing him up with steel breaks. If it's a left-handed pitcher, we're working on one-way leads versus a lefty. If I see that pitcher is all of a sudden working on simulating a runner on second base, I'll quickly sprint the runners over to second, and we'll get steel breaks and off the live BPs and stuff like that. So anytime there's an opportunity to give these guys those game-like reps, we try to hop on it.
Love it. Love it. And then we're going to get to the base running, because I know that's special. I mean, there's some new things you brought into the organization. Here's the other thing. Now you got new rules. So in spring training, you had to make some adjustments. Yeah. Talk about some of those adjustments you had to make, whether it be pitchers or whether it be base runners and anything else in the game.
Well, the first thing I think is the pitch clock. We had to get pitch clocks installed here at the spring training facility. So that was a priority. The other thing, of course, is there's larger bases in professional baseball now as well. They're kind of like pizza boxes.
Yeah.
So, the larger base at second, it just goes where the old smaller base used to go, but you actually have to move the moorings for first and third base. So that required some construction from our group. Yeah. But, that makes the baselines a little bit shorter, and, that those inches mean something. It's more amenable to stealing bases. And the other one is the pick rules. Now, pitchers can pick to a base 3 times in an inning. or to a runner. And, if that third pick doesn't result in an out, that runner was awarded the next base.
Mm-hmm.
Runner, if you can draw 2 pickoff throws, you're sitting pretty over there. You'd be pretty aggressive.
Yes. And I'm assuming as you're writing down your schedule, because not only you have the schedule, but you also got to think, okay, in this schedule, I got to implement all this new stuff
Yep.
that, so the coaches and managers are working on those.
Yeah. And what I did was, during on-field batting practice, traditionally there's a base running station, and that base running group will work on live reads. You'll have runners on first base reacting to a ground ball or a line drive or a fly ball. And then you move them over to second base and they'll do the same thing. They'll simulate no outs. They'll simulate 1 out. Then they'll go over to third base and they'll, simulate a contact play. What I did is I kind of hijacked that a little bit, and I took that base running group into a bullpen, and we worked on what I call a new school steal breaks. So, I made sure they were still getting their live reads during batting practice now and again, but just not every day. I just kind of took that group and I called it my base stealing lab. And we just rethought the way we use that time and where we could have that space. And also I added an early work group pretty much every day, where I took a group of guys and, we worked on base stealing stuff.
I'm assuming too that you've, speaking about base stealing, now most teams are going to be a little bit more aggressive because of the pitch rules, because of the larger bases.
Yeah.
The shift and all that.
Yeah. My thoughts on that was, this is coming, and it's coming fast.
Yeah.
Anthony Volpe is the poster child. He's the guy who's doing the New York Yankees, and everybody's like,
he steals every time he's on.
Yeah. It's like, what is this new wizardry? And there's a lot, like Anthony Volpe didn't just wake up out of bed yesterday and start doing this. He's been practicing this since he entered the Yankees organization with their base running coordinator, Matt Tallarico.
Matt, been on the show.
Yeah, he's awesome, man. And he's been a great influence on me. But my sort of getting on my pulpit, what I preach to the Cubs organization is, we can't be the organization that is not teaching this. So that's, we are dipping our toe in the water with, some people call it vault leads, some people call it jump lead steal breaks, some people call them momentum steals, some people call them new school way of stealing versus old school. But whatever you call it, man, it's definitely something that's arrived in professional in Major League Baseball. And it's been in college baseball for a while. Not everybody knows about it, but I've been teaching this stuff since 2014.
Wow. And folks, we're getting to it. We may be teasing you a little bit, but we're getting to the base running. And, Kev's doing a great job right here teasing this. But before we do, I want to mention, I was watching MLB Network. I get delayed stuff here because I have to tape it a lot of times. But, it's interesting, folks. If you haven't seen it, we're going to post it. I'm sure you've seen it on MLB Network. Time of game now in 2022. I know it's a small sample, 4 or 5 games, but from 308 to 238. So that's a half-hour drop. Stolen bases. 29 stolen bases, 43 attempts and 22, and now it's 70 and 84. Stolen base percentages is up to 83%. It was 67. So there's obviously, we're starting to see, which I agree with, because I just, and Kev is a baseball guy. To me, baseball was just getting too slow. It was boring. I hate to say that, because here I am, a lifetime baseball guy for over 40 years. Doesn't mean I didn't watch it, right? I still watch it because I love it. I'm like you, I'm watching certain things. I'm watching other things than just the game, trying to pick up the small little things. Maybe I can learn something. But it is because we are speeding up the game. We're going to see more hits, more base stealing, a little bit more action. The game will be it's going to be a lot more fun, man.
Yeah. Well, Pete, my favorite player growing up was Ricky Henderson. I loved Vince Coleman. I loved Tim Raines. I loved all the guys that stole bases. I had a Lou Brock poster on my wall, even though he was before my time when I was a kid growing up.
Yeah, that was my guy.
Yeah. Another thing, Pete, is I grew up in Albany, New York on New Scotland Avenue. And I grew up across the street from something called the New York State Training Academy. And this is the training academy where they train all the prison guards in the state of New York. And on the training academy grounds, they had a softball diamond that the prison guards, the trainee prison guards, and they would play in a softball league. But they would let us little kids from the neighborhood, play sandlot style baseball on that softball diamond. And man, I'm telling you, in the summer, almost every day, we'd be on that softball diamond on that training academy grounds. And it would be me and my friends against you and your friends, just playing full baseball games, and no coaches, no adults, no umpires, no signs, we were in T-shirts. And man, if I wanted to, make a hard turn at first base and getting a rundown on purpose just because it was fun, man, like I would do that.
Yeah.
If I want to steal second base, like I would do that. And I'd have to wait for a sign from anybody. And I do think with the advent of travel baseball and club baseball and these amazing indoor facilities that people have all over that we didn't have when we were kids, I think they're great for the development of the game, but I also think that kids playing baseball are a little bit robotic. They don't know just like how to go out there and sort of play.
Yeah.
Someone's, flipping them front toss or giving them a sign or telling us exactly what to do. And so I love thinking about base running and base stealing as in terms of like a play that a player can make without waiting for a sign. Like you have timing, distance, and anticipation, they fall into place and you go. And that's the main thing I love about the way baseball has sort of turned back in that direction.
Yeah, and I agree with you, man, because now we're going to start getting more and more players, especially in the US, as the game starts to develop at the grassroots level, that have a little bit more instincts in the game, right? That's developing the instincts, which they had, when you get the Dominican kids, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, the, Latin American kids, they do exactly what you're talking about, right? And then I've always said it, if we're going to have bad coaching at certain levels, if we have, they say, bad coach, when you're going to have bad coaching at all levels, but if you're going to have it at the young kids level, let them play by themselves then. They're better off because they'll learn more doing that than having a bad coach. Listen, before I get to the base running, I will. And folks, we're going to do a little bit of base running, and we're going to do a second section here because I don't want to keep Kevin on for too many hours here. But on a personal note, a little bit that I'm watching on television, like I said, in Carolina, I don't get all the Cubs stuff. I'm looking at the Cubs, the way they've structured their lineup, their defense. Really doing a good job. And I just from a personal note, I think we're seeing a lineup of more guys that make more contact, less strikeouts. You got guys that can hit home runs too. That's all planned, right? According to the rules that are going on. I'm assuming that recruiting, that those trades, I like the lineup that the Cubs have. So I think the Cubs are going in the right direction. And I would say the opposite if I thought the opposite, but I don't. I really like it. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Nico Horner, Nick Madrigal, I could go on and on with the players that I think fall into that description that you just mentioned. I think that in addition to the base running stuff coming back into the fold in baseball, a trend is for a while, man, strikeouts were kind of like, okay, they were a necessary evil because, we're trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Sure.
I think that with the Cubs, there's an emphasis on fundamental baseball. And I saw it, with my own eyes, working with Andy Green, the bench coach, working with David Ross, the manager during big league spring training. They're working on execution. They're working on getting bunts down, hitting runs, and that kind of thing. And having like real good hitters who can hit in situations in addition to guys that can just bang the ball out of the ballpark.
You get calls, I'm assuming, from whether it's David Ross or the GM or somebody else that's higher up that all of a sudden says, hey, Kev, we need to do this, not in spring training, but you need to talk to the minor league coaches or managers, and we need to make an adjustment. Here's what we're adjusting throughout the season. Does that happen?
Yeah, for instance, it happened with bunt coverages with us during spring training. We sort of talked about bunt coverages at the minor league level happening in one way, and then there was a change at the big league level, and we kind of had to revisit that and make the adjustment to match and get in rhythm with what the big league club was doing. So yeah, those conversations are always being had. I mentioned that throughout the course of spring training, I'm getting time with Andy Green, the major league bench coach, pretty much every day. We have a vice president of player development, Jared Banner, as well, that I'm in constant contact with. And, so there's a lot of making sure that there is sort of, a rhythm and synchronicity throughout the organization and the way we're doing things.
We're going to see a little bit more bunting at the big league level too, or?
Well, it was a point of emphasis in spring training, especially at the minor level. We have a great outfield coordinator named Doug DeCenzo, who took an early work group pretty much every day during minor league spring training in one of the outdoor cages and made it his sort of bunting palace, which was a lot of fun. And one day I didn't have base running early work, and I went over there and I just kind of hovered around and watched Doug do his thing, and he was amazing, and he made it fun, and technique was great, and we have a minor league system full of guys who can bunt.
Hey, speaking of fun, you mentioned when you were playing, when as a kid and all that, and when we talked about mentioned the Dominican Republic and Cuba. Is there something you guys do in spring training to kind of, do you ever say, hey guys, we're just going to sit down, you guys play, I don't know, toss the ball up and hit it, or do something, just for fun. Just let them play the game a little bit and enjoy it, and not interfere at all.
Not so much.
That's I know you only have so much time. There's a lot to get in.
But I love that you just said that. I mean, every year when I was coaching high school baseball, I always arrived with a practice plan. The guys were accustomed to the fact that when they came to the ball field or our indoor facility, our field house, they would go to the bulletin board and they would see what's happening every second of every minute of that practice. They knew what they were doing for dynamic stretch, for pre-practice throwing. They knew what we were doing for our team defensive block, individual defense. They knew what hitting groups they were in. Pitchers knew if they were long tossing or flat ground, and they got bullpens, who their catch is going to be. And we were like ants on a hill. But one day every year I would arrive with a practice plan, and the practice plan just had one sentence on it. And it was like, play wiffle ball.
Yes.
And I would just put the equipment like out on the thing, and they'd be asking me like, how do we pick teams? Or what do we do? What are the rules?
Yeah.
Like, you figure it out.
We never had that problem when we were kids picking teams.
Man.
We even did the bat. Remember the bat to pick up who's going to hit first? And listen, man, I want to get the base running. We okay time wise?
Oh yeah, I got plenty of time.
Because I know you got a dentist appointment. We got to get you to that.
Yeah, plenty of time.
We got time. Okay. Well, before we get to the base running, because I got another one.
Yeah.
I'm interested in understanding every coach at the minor league. Let's take the minor league guys, since that's who you're dealing with the most here. They all got to get better. Everybody wants to get better, right? And the hardest thing is to be critiqued. How does that work in your system? Do coaches get critiqued? Who sits down with them? What do they discuss? Is it like you're watching the practice? I'll give you an example, is because I've got ABC, coaches, Hall of Fame coaches that are friends of mine, and maybe they'll go on a trip with us internationally, and I've got guys that'll say to me, which is amazing. And you wonder why there's good. They'll say, hey, Pete, and they're asking me, and they got 10 times more experience than I have. They're saying, hey, you're going to sit back in the stands. Do me a favor, watch the game, write some notes, and then let's talk about it afterwards, what you thought could have been different, because they want a different perspective, right?
Right.
How does that work in your system?
Well, for me, it's something I'll learn a little bit more about, having just started in the organization on November 1st, getting that first year under my belt. But
will you implement something like that? Where
there's structures in place that my first year in the organization, I'm sort of learning how this whole thing works. Gotcha. If that makes sense. But there's definitely a hierarchy of coaches. There's position coaches and hitting coaches and pitching coaches. There's the coordinators. We also have directors of hitting and directors of pitching. And then we also have our front office staff, our vice president of player development, everybody that sort of works in that area.
And they're evaluating and they'll sit down with individual coaches because they're responsible for their own tasks. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, we have, a lot of information at our disposal as well. We have a portal in our organization called Ivy, and on Ivy, there's every metric you could possibly think of for every player and everything they do. Wow. And you can log into Ivy and just get lost in the data. You really, really can. But there are measurables for everything that we're doing. And that's another way you can evaluate, in addition to sort of the human aspect of how people are evaluated.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I watch MLB Network. I love it. I love Brian Kenny. He brings a lot of perspectives, and he also challenges people. But I get a headache sometimes, like you said, all this data. I'm like, wow, I got to shut it off for a second just to catch up, because there is a lot of data. But it's interesting. Even today, somebody was talking about, it's nice to have the data, but you also have to be able to understand it, implement it, and then use the human aspect of the game too. Yeah,
and not overwhelm the players with it. I think that's really, really well said. One thing that we do during spring training is in tandem with our morning staff meetings, we have something called Coaches Ed. And during Coaches Ed, it's a 15-minute block before we start our spring training day. It's people who have expertise in our organization coming and teaching the coaches.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it could be something about Rapsodo data and like what all this means, or it could be gripping a baseball bat, how you grip a baseball bat can impact the data that we might see on Ivy. I did a base running coaches ed, a base stealing coaches ed, how we do advanced scouting. That's really cool for me, is learning from these amazing coaches who are really, really good at what they do.
Yeah, Kev, I keep looking at my phone just so you know. I'm not, my parents always taught me when we're talking to somebody, look at them. But once in a while, I got to jump here on Facebook because Here we are, Randall Irons, bunning, old school baseball, love it. Wish we could see more of it. Well, Randall, you're going to see more. You'll see more bunning at the big league level. I'll bet you. You're going to. I definitely seen a lot of base stealing already. All right, let's jump into it. Let's at least get it started, and then we'll have the second edition to it. And I do want to mention, Kevin, something that's really is changing in the game, what you just talked about, the educational part. Look at all the every major league team now goes to the ABCA, the American Baseball Coaches Association. We've got international people going there, obviously. The technology's all there. Everybody's learning together. And I think that's why the game's getting better and better, not just in the US, but around the world.
And the coaches we're hiring in these organizations come from all walks of life now.
Yes.
Used to be, entry into, professional coaching was a little bit difficult because, you had to have that sort of, I played in the big leagues pedigree.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And now we got people coaching at all levels, in all disciplines, hitting, pitching, everything, who maybe, have a non-traditional background in that sense, which I think is really, really cool.
What I love about it, and I'll use this comparison, but I'll give you an example. A lot of times I'll sit my wife watch a baseball game and she doesn't know much about baseball. She'll watch it here and there. And then she'll say, how come he's doing that? Why doesn't he do it this way? Then here I am going, what? She's right. Because you got that different perspective. So now all of a sudden you got all these young people coming in with new ideas, fresh ideas, challenging a little bit, how it was done before. That's making the game better. I know people get upset and say, oh, they're too young, this, that. No, we need younger people in the game. It gives you that life, that new, fresh look to everything.
Yeah. And one buzzword that I hear a lot in professional baseball is evidence-based. And sometimes it's the young people, it's the people who are, have grown up with this technology, that are really good at navigating that evidence-based part of it and culling the data.
Absolutely. All right. So evidence-based, let's talk about base running.
Yeah.
Let's get it started. Talk about, you talk about the jump, the lead, the steals, but talk about is it a new look? Is it the old school was different than the new school?
Yeah. So here's my story with what I call jump, lead, steal breaks. 2014, I was coaching at Phillips Academy Andover, and we had a really, really talented team. And I think we started the season like 1-3 or 1-4 or something like that. And we were falling behind in games. And, the conventional wisdom is like, when you fall behind in the score, that sort of shuts down your running game. You know what I mean? And it just felt like we were watching the sand run out of the hourglass in the late innings of games in which we had a deficit. And I just felt like there's got to be something we can do when we fall behind in these games rather than just waiting around for the game to end. And intuitively, I felt like it was between second and third base. I don't know what it was, but I just felt like there was something there. And Pete, I'm telling you, it was, we lost a game on a Wednesday. And that Wednesday night, I searched to the back edge of the internet for just some kind of base running, base stealing wizardry. And I discovered this guy named Mike Roberts.
Oh yeah.
And Mike Roberts is really the forefather of what we call this new school base stealing stuff. And
with the Cubs, right?
He has been with the Cubs. Yeah.
I remember.
As a consultant. He's with the Pirates now. He also coaches, he's the head coach of the Katua Kettleers in the Cape Cod League. So I got a chance to coach against him in the Cape Cod League as well. And basically that Wednesday night in 2014, I purchased everything that Mike Roberts had put out on anywhere. He wrote a book at the time. It was called You Can't Steal Second Base with Your Foot on First or something. It had a title. And I'm telling you, I got this stuff and I pulled an all-nighter and we started putting this stuff in practice the next day. And really what I learned from Mike Roberts, he's also the dad of Brian Roberts. And Brian Roberts was the master of doing this stuff in Major League Baseball. And he was stealing 50, 60 bases a year and not a speed burner. He was all technical. But what I learned from Mike Roberts is, number one, you got to get the technique perfect. You got to teach these guys how to do it in terms of, your foot goes here and your shuffle looks like this, and this is how much distance. Technique's got to be first. And then after that, you start teaching timing, you start teaching distance, and you start teaching anticipation. And then once the guys get a feel for it, they run when those things fall into place. You got the technique down, so you don't have to think about that anymore. But then when timing, distance, and anticipation fall into place, they give it to you, you take it. We don't care what the score is. We don't care how many outs there are. man, if they give it to you, we take it. And, it means you have to fight back against conventional wisdom a little bit. For instance, conventional wisdom means like with no outs, why would I steal third base when the hitter can hit a ground ball to the right side and get me over with one out? Or with two outs, why would we try to steal third base when I'm going to score from second on contact anyway? And again, I always fall back on that, man. If you give it to us, we take it. Timing, distance, and anticipation. And if we do it right, you can't throw us out.
What's doing it right?
All right. So let's talk about timing first. When we talk about, I call them jump lead steal breaks, but whether you're at first base or whether you're at second base, the timing has to be you are off before leg lift. And that is really, really scary for players who are unfamiliar with this, with this philosophy, because, you're taught your whole life, wait till leg lift and be explosive towards second base.
Yep.
Gaining ground toward the next base before leg lift, you're really vulnerable, because if they pick while you're doing that, you're out there kind of on an island. You got to know what to do. So the first thing is we got to get the technique down. What we're teaching our guys at first base, technique wise, is number one is we got to have our distances. And so, a traditional old school primary lead is, 11, 12 feet, the left foot to the back corner of first base. This new school stuff, we're out to only 6 feet. The technique of the shuffle is really, really important. We got to be low, and we got to be 50-50. We got to be able to return to first base if they pick. We also got to be able to turn that shuffle into a steal break for second base if we catch leg lift. So we got to be able to go in 2 different directions. So
you're taking less of a lead.
Yeah, you're cutting it in half.
Half.
Yeah, and that's what gives players comfort.
Sure.
Is we're shuffling out, and they're picking while we're shuffling, but we're really close to first base.
Yeah.
So ideally, it evens out.
Yeah, you're hedging your bet here a little bit.
Yeah, and I think one of the hardest things to get players to understand technique wise is they're so used to like, I gotta go. And the shuffle has to be real easy. It's got to be like.
Is that different than a walking lead? At
first, a little bit different. Because a walking lead, you're literally walking, and you try to walk into a steal break. Right. We're set up stationary at 6 feet. Okay. One thing I have to teach the guys also is the closer you are to first base, actually, the more upright we want our runners. The further you are to first base, the more down, spread out, and in a crouch.
Why is that? Get back?
Because we have to be relaxed. If we're tense and trying to explode, we just gain too much ground towards second base, and we're too directional going there. You can't you're kind of like a boxer, you want to be loose and relaxed. And it's like a bodybuilder on stage at a bodybuilding performance. They don't go up there fully flexed, because you can't flex muscles that are already flexed. You know what I mean? They're kind of relaxed, and they hit you with boom.
How are you anticipating now? So you got that, let's just say you're using feet. So instead of 12, 6,
yeah.
How are you anticipating now early shuffle?
Yeah, let's I just want to finish up on technique.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So the first part of this shuffle is, I'm relaxed. I'm at 6 feet. I take my right foot and I kind of scrape it toward the ground, towards second base, just a little bit. That's my first move. And then my shuffle follows after that. And we got to be low to the ground. I call it a ground scraping shuffle. If we don't have that right foot jab out first, and we just kind of bounce out 2 feet at the same time, we get really bouncy. And if we're bouncy and if we're in the air, we're more vulnerable to a pick.
Is this just a short jab? It's just a short jab?
Yeah. So, what I do is when we do our base running drill work, I'll put a baseball out at 6 feet, and that's where our new school primary lead is. I'll put another baseball out at 12 feet. So basically what we're doing is we're shuffling to the point where our left foot lands just a little bit short of what I call the 12-foot safety zone, or it might land at the 12-foot safety zone. So if we shuffle out and they pick, and that left foot is shy of the 12-foot safety zone, we can jam on the brakes, cross over, and dive back.
Interesting.
And if we shuffle out and we don't catch leg lift and the pitcher just holds, we can shuffle out and just stay right there. And now we're in an old school 12-foot lead.
Now, what's changing, since you're talking about that, what's changing now? If he picked over twice, now he's not picking over a third time. Is there anything changing in that?
I just think the mindset becomes more aggressive, to be quite honest.
But can they take a bigger lead?
But you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go past 6 feet if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. The timing aspect of it is really interesting, because you have to watch baseball in a way that perhaps you're not accustomed to. I think minor league players are used to watching pitchers to see what their pitches look like. Oh, there's his fastball. It does this, it tails this much, or there's his breaking ball. He throws it this hard. This is how much it breaks. This is where he starts it. This is where he finishes it. Now we're teaching guys to watch pitchers in a way that's unlocking their mind in a way that I think is really, really cool. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for habits. We're looking for pitchers, for whom the most important thing is the quality of the pitch coming out of their hand, who aren't really worried about it. What's happening with the runner on first base is secondary, right? So with the runner on first, I'll give you an example. We had some live VPs yesterday, and there was a pitcher on the mound, and he was doing this every time. He's coming set, and he's doing this with his foot. 1, 2, 3, leg lift and go. So what I'm teaching my guys is, if he's doing that every time, when he gets that third leg tap, that's when we hit our shuffle. That's our timing. And, try it out. If you shuffle out, you catch leg lift, you keep going. If you shuffle out, you don't catch leg lift, you either stick or you bounce back. And so it's teaching guys to have anticipation in a way that unlocks their mind in a way that's pretty cool.
And folks listening to the podcast, you're not watching, go ahead, you can go on YouTube, but I'm sure you understand where that front foot's kind of bouncing 3 times before he sets. But you could check it out. What about
that's just one example. There's a million things that guys do.
What about now if it's just, one set, they set?
Yeah.
Now, how do you anticipate?
So what I like to do is break pitchers down into 3 categories: high respect, medium respect, respect. The high respect guys are the guys who are good athletes. They have quick feet, quick pickoff move to first base. They're good at varying their looks. So, they might come set and be like 1,001, 1,002, 1,003 leg lift. Next time they might be 1,001 leg lift. They vary from pitch to pitch. They're hard to get a read on because they're doing different things every time. And they're athletic. Medium respect pitchers are guys, have an average pickoff move. They're sort of comfortable with varying their looks. They're kind of like average on the athlete side. The low respect pitchers are the guys, Pete, you can probably picture this in your mind, but the dude who throws wicked hard, big feet, big hands, big slow delivery, but not super athletic.
Yep.
Not a great pickoff move.
Yeah, you can anticipate on him a lot.
Yeah, and now you have a high respect pitcher, medium respect pitcher, and low respect pitchers. Now you got to break your runners down into fast, medium, and slow. And they all have to have a role within this base running attack. Your fast guys should feel like they're running a lot. They're the elite guys. They're the guys who can straight steal, but they can also do this new school jump lead, still break stuff. And, we want those guys running. We want them with an 80% success rate. The medium guys, sometimes Pete can be setup guys for the fast guys. And what I mean by a setup guy is we'll have the medium guys shuffle with no intent to steal to draw pickoff throws. So it's like a one-way lead if you applied that concept to a shuffle. So they'll shuffle out and shuffle right back and try to draw a throw. And the more pitchers pick to a base and they see we're having easy returns, the more discouraged they get, and the more they're just like, well, the heck with this. I'm going to focus on the hitter. And that's when we start, doing our thing. The guys we break down into slow runners, those guys might be really good at momentum steal breaks, but they're not great runners. And I think their first priority is don't get picked off ever.
Yeah.
Only easy returns, right? Never close plays on those returns. And, when they aren't holding you on or that pitcher's just totally ignoring you, boom, hit them with a Cobra strike steal break. A slow runner, great year, goes 6 for 6 stealing bases on the season. It's awesome. Medium runner for us, if you can get 15 to 20 bags, that's awesome. Those elite runners, we got to get them stealing, running. But, we're teaching our guys, the technique first. We're teaching them about how to work the timing and also the anticipation. The anticipation is, this different way to watch baseball, different way to watch a pitcher.
I love it because they're constantly moving. What about, you guys have all the technology, you got the videos, you see the pictures all the time. So you can go to video and check out every picture. Your teams can look at them. Sometimes high school and colleges and travel teams don't have that luxury. What's your advice how to teach this technique? I know you got to practice it and practice, but picking up those, things that pitchers do, how do you pick that up?
Yeah.
Prior to a game?
Well, one thing we did, Pete, during minor league spring training games, we greenlit every base runner.
All of them.
And, I'm so thankful for the managers that we have because, we had guys who had never heard of this stuff before,
Right.
and they're just out there shuffling out, just getting blown up, picked off. And if I'm the manager and this is a new concept to me, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Right.
But we treated it as our lab, and we just tried to get better at it and better at it, and then understand that, okay, once the season starts, not everybody is greenlit all the time. This is how we got to be systematic about it. And that's kind of what I broke down to you about, breaking the pitchers down into categories, breaking the runners down into categories, and trying to have as much advanced scouting as we possibly can on these pitchers as well, so these guys are armed with information.
So if you're a high school team, you're practicing it, you're letting them fail, they're going to get better at it. Okay, I got that part. But now you get to the game and you got to read the pitcher. You got to know something about the pitcher. How do you handle that? How do you know what his technique is? Because pitchers do have habits. So I guess you got to pay attention a lot in the game.
All right, I'm going to give you a pro tip here. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
This should be behind a paywall. This should be behind a paywall somewhere. But I'll give you an example. Second base is a whole different ball game than what I was talking about, what we're teaching these guys at first base. And one of the main differences is at first base, you have a first baseman holding the runner on first base, physically standing on the bag. At second base, you have a shortstop or a second baseman who are kind of like, in the neighborhood. They're not standing on the base, right?
Yeah.
So you have the freedom to maneuver, to do some stuff. You can be.
That's a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. And also pitchers have looks with a runner on second base. For instance, they'll come set, look at the runner once, eyes toward home plate, look at the runner a second time, eyes toward home plate, leg lift, deliver to the plate. And so what we used to do with my high school program is just years of teaching this and years of watching baseball at every level. I don't see much happening after second look, except a delivery to home plate. You very rarely see a flash pick after a second look. You very rarely see a timing pick. You very rarely see an inside move. Generally, all that stuff happens no look or after one look. So what we had our guys doing is your default is to put a bounty on second look. So they would take their primary lead and they would see the pitcher look once back toward home plate. And then when they'd see that pitcher look back towards second base a second time, like their spidey sense would start tingling, and they would the timing was to beat those eyes back to home plate. And you're shuffling out as those pitchers' eyes are reaching home plate. So that's your timing off before a leg lift. And we were pretty successful with that. So that's an example of sort of how we operated without any information. Hey, Pete, I think I lost you there for a second. Hey, Pete, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry, folks. We went blank for a second. The internet went down, came right back up. But go ahead, Kevin, continue. You were right where with second base.
Pete, we broke the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we took, what happened, I think, is we took you past the hour limit.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
No. We got plenty of time. It's just sometimes
fine.
there's a storm here in Charlotte, so I'm sure the storm might have had something to do with that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where we got cut off, but
second base, you were talking about the how it's done differently at second because you have more time, more and the infielders got to keep moving, and you got more time to move.
So did we talk about looks? Did I get to that?
You did talk about looks. Yeah, the pitcher being set and looking once, then going or looking twice. And pitchers are creatures of habit, right?
Yes. So basically what I, having a high school program and coaching summer ball as well, with no information about these pitchers, that second look would be our default. We would put a bounty on that second look. And so when our runners would see the, pitcher look back at the runner once, eyes back toward home plate, look back at the runner a second time, their spidey sense would start tingling and say, oh, second look. When they would time it up before those eyes reach home plate a second time, they would be shuffling out towards second base. The really important thing for the runners between second and third to understand is that you can't be in a rush to turn your shoulders toward third base, because leg lift can turn into inside move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they got to get used to gaining ground laterally with their chest parallel to the first baseline. What I always communicate to base runners is it's not about taking off on first movement. It's about taking off laterally before first movement. And you have until that ball comes out of the pitcher's hand to gain a certain amount of distance.
Yeah.
If you can get out to say 25, 26 feet before the ball comes out of the pitcher's hand, they can't throw you out at third base unless you faint or trip over your shoelaces.
I know certain coaches teach different things, and sometimes coaches teach a deeper lead back, or even with the base. Has that changed?
So I always have the runners in the baseline between second and third.
Love it.
I know some coaches will have them deep and they'll creep in and that kind of thing, but I want
Yeah,
them the shortest distance between 2 points. So if they
love
catch a
that.
leg lift, we shuffle out and we're gone.
Yeah, and you got to be ready for the catcher to throw back throw to second base too, right?
Yeah, totally. An inside move is something that can happen, but
Mhm.
what I found is that 97% of the time when a pitcher inside moves, there's no fielder at second base. So our guys got to use,
Right.
they haven't turned toward third base yet. They've been gaining ground laterally, so they jam on the brakes. At first base, it's a step and a dive. At second base, it's a step and a dive. And
The
I wanted to
Go
say,
ahead, go ahead. Go, no, no, go, go, go.
right there. One of the things I haven't talked about is I think perhaps one of the most important things in teaching this system of base stealing is the guys have to be really, really good at returns and dive backs. Like they have to be they have to know the technique. They have to be comfortable with it. They have to have practiced it a lot. To be a good base stealer, you got to be comfortable being off the bag. Being comfortable being off the bag means that you got to know the exact technique to dive back if they pick. And we drill it and we drill it and we drill it.
You know what? I love that, because I remember in independent ball a lot of times, even double A, triple A guys, they'd have a great lead, great break, and then they'd sit for a second, that 1 second that, the catcher could back pick. And so I'm with you, man. I think that's awesome. I'm thinking out loud here, so I have no clue what I'm about to say. But I'm thinking, if you're going to practice this, does it make sense to practice second base first, where you're getting a bigger lead, and then go to first base?
It does. Yeah, it
Yeah.
absolutely does. Because there's a comfort level and there's a quicker path toward finding success. Sometimes in the programs I coach, I feel like every one of your guys can be good at this between second and third.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's good at it between first and second. So the guys that end up being really, really good at it, I kind of call them my special forces group. Those are the guys that, I sort of work a little bit extra with, make sure they're taking great pride in it. The great thing about teaching everybody this technique between first and second, though, is even the guys that don't end up becoming good at it, it helps with everything, because you're learning timing, distance, anticipation, and technique. And there's no part of base running that's not important for. And learning the stuff between first and second makes you good at the stuff between second and third. And it's a lot easier between second and third.
Makes sense. Makes a total sense. How about first base? What changes with the left-handed pitcher in this technique?
All right. So what I teach versus left-handed pitchers is, by and large, we're out to an old school 12-foot primary lead off the back corner of the bag. And I teach a technique with one-way lead that might be a little bit different than a lot of coaches out there, because we have a jab step back toward first base in rhythm with a left-handed pitcher's leg lift. So when he lifts his leg, we jab back toward first base. I also take the left hand and I move it back toward first base in tandem with the left foot, for two reasons. Number one, it creates the illusion that we're closer to first base than we actually are. And number two, if he picks and we dive back, the first thing to hit the ground is actually your left hand.
Well, I love that. Wow.
It sets you up right there for a good dive back.
Wow.
And having a good one-way lead means we're not susceptible to a pickoff versus a left-handed pitcher. Left-handed pitchers can be tricky in that regard. So we're hedging our bets, we're protecting ourselves. But it also allows us to one-way lead. Then when we know that pitcher's going to the plate, that left-handed pitcher, we can turn that into a hit and run break. We can turn that into a delay steal. We can turn that into a run and hit steal break. We can turn that into a really good secondary that we can turn into a ball and dirt read. I don't like, I used to see in the Cape Cod League, we were playing against opponents and a left-handed pitcher would be on the mound for us. And I'd watch the opposing team and the runners weren't doing anything. They were just kind of hanging out like 2 feet off the bag and getting bad secondaries. And, they didn't know what to do if a hit and run was on. And so I think having a good secondary lead and practicing turning that into other things, like a hit and run, like a run and hit, like a delay steal, it adds a lot of stuff that you can do against that left-handed pitcher. And of course, you can steal first movement against that left-handed pitcher if you want as well. Now, with the jump lead steal breaks, some of those special forces guys are wizards. And sometimes you'll get a guy who's so good at it, they can actually do it against left-handed pitchers as well. Those guys are really, really special. That's like the Brian Roberts of the world. They're few and far between, but there are guys who can do it.
Is it now, if I was a left-handed pitcher, but if you're going to, let's say you took a 6-foot league, isn't it much easier for the base runner to read everything?
If I'm only at a 6-foot lead, if I'm going to new school steel break, if I'm going to try and shuffle out before a leg lift.
Okay.
Yeah. If we're just, a one-way lead versus left-handed pitcher and I'm jab stepping back, I really want to be out further, closer to 12 feet so that we can maybe hit and run, so that we can maybe delay steal, so we can get a good ball in dirt read.
Folks, we're going to continue this talk because we're going to have Kevin back on another show, but we got to end here pretty soon. I did want to mention before we end, Kevin, this has been fantastic, man. I love some of this stuff. Are we going to see, we're probably going to see more pitch outs in Major League Baseball because they're going to have to do something different after 2 picks, right? 2 things, pitch outs. And what about, a lot of pro, I remember seeing a lot of pro pitchers. They're such in a habit of doing it their way sometimes, that some guys will lift high anyways, they don't care about the base runner. Is that going to change? Are we going to see a lower lift, more pitch outs? What do you think?
Oh man, I think it probably should go in that direction. But again, the number one priority for these pitchers is always going to be the quality of the pitch coming out of their hand.
Yeah, it is.
It's just always going to be about the spin rate and the velocity, and they're gonna that's where the focus is, and that's what we're trying to take advantage of as with a systematic base stealing approach. As far as the pitch outs go, man, if you catch a new school steal break before a leg lift, it doesn't matter if they pitch out, you're safe.
Wow.
Yeah, if you do it right, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and that's the key. That's interesting.
And that's one of the challenges, Pete, is helping guys understand when they have it and when they do not. At first base, I call it hitting the button. And what I mean by that is when we shuffle out before a leg lift, that right foot is in the air. Can you picture that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we catch leg lift, their right foot hits the ground. I call that hitting the button. We hit the button and go. If we catch a pick off, we hit the button and dive back. If we catch nothing, pitcher just holds, hit the button and stay. And so that hitting the button thing is really, really important. That really helps you understand I have it and I'm going to go, or I don't have it and I got to dive back.
Man, the light bulb just went off, and I'll tell you why. Because 20 years, 25, maybe even 30 years ago, I remember being with a coach who taught proper movement, footwork in sports, he taught the Olympic athletes. And I showed him, the baseball technique of base stealing. And what he showed me was exactly what you're talking about, was the lead foot lifting up, then going. And not only did it do what you're talking about, but he talked about the momentum that was going that way. And it's easier to push off with the left foot because your momentum's going that way. So that's very interesting. I just wanted to mention that because I thought I love it.
And Pete, it also correlates to secondary leads as well. You want to have that right foot kind of in the air when the ball gets to the hitting zone, so you can hit the button and react to that batted ball, or if the ball's not hit.
That goes to third base too, right? But isn't that what we're teaching?
And also an infielder's prep step on defense as well. They'll do that little right, left, and a little bit of a hop. They're actually in the air when the ball's getting to the hitting zone because they want to land and then react to that batted ball directionally and, forward, backward, or whatever. So it correlates to a lot of different things.
All right. I got a million questions, so we're going to have a second show, but I'm going to end it with this one because I want to go back to the technique. I failed to ask you, and you may have mentioned it, but I forgot. You just introduced this to the organization first week.
Yeah.
How are you teaching the technique? Are we lining guys up? I got to start somewhere, because I remember this every time I learned a new technique as a coach. Say you taught me the base running, or Tom House taught me something in pitching. I had to go do it as a coach over and over myself for a week sometimes, because if I was going to teach it, I needed to know how to really do it. So what did you guys work on with the players? How did you start?
So the foundational drill comes from Matt Tallarico, and it's called the daily walk drill. And so the daily walk drill, you can have 4 lines of guys and 4 bases set up. You'll have, again, a baseball set up at 6 feet, another baseball set up at 12 feet. Okay. So for my version of the daily walk drill, the first thing we're doing is we're walking out to an old school 12-foot primary lead. That's the first thing. They're just getting used to that. And for us, it's left foot, pivot, shuffle out to 12, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And then they do that. Then we'll add dive back, and we have mats that I bought for the organization. These, the mats with the capes on them, and so we'll have them walk out to a 12-foot primary lead, and then they'll cross over and dive back and make sure we're getting the perfect technique on that. Then what we'll do is we'll have them walk out to the 6-foot new school steel lead, and that's just left foot square up, a little bit of a shuffle out to 6 feet. Then we'll have them do that again, but we'll add that shuffle out to 12. Then we'll have them do it again, and we'll have them 6 feet, shuffle out, turn the shuffle into a steel break. And then the last thing we'll do is we'll have them walk out to the 6-foot lead, have the shuffle, add a dive back to the shuffle. So that's the daily walk drill. They got to know those distances on any field in the world. So on our spring training diamonds, it's pretty easy because the cutout around first base is exactly 12 feet on all of our diamonds. And so 6 feet is a math equation. It's halfway between the back corner of first base and the cutout, right? But one of the things we do during the daily walk drill is we'll actually have them walk out to these distances with their eyes closed as well. And that's a lot of fun.
Wow.
So with their eyes closed, they'll open them up and see where they are and like, okay, I was a little too far, or I was a little too short. They have to know their distances. It's really, really important. So that's the daily walk drill. It gives them a sense of their distances, their technique for taking their primary leads, and their technique for dive backs, and their technique for the shuffle break.
And I know that takes time, and everybody's different, and some guys going to get it quicker than others and all that. Then eventually, and we've all done this, not that technique, but with even the old school techniques, eventually, and this is where I want to maybe start the next show on and kind of prep everybody for what we're going to talk about. And if you want to give a little intro to it, that'd be great. Eventually, it's got to happen in real game. We can practice, I see a lot of times you can work on, running down first base, touching the base, looking to your right, all that stuff. Then it happens at a game, they don't do it. Eventually, we got to make a game like.
Yeah, and in college baseball is where they've gotten really, really good at this. They have fall ball, and they do it all.
Right.
Spring training.
Here's a spring training
games, right? So we had that luxury as well. So,
but is there anything in spring training practices that you implement to make it look more real, like a game?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that where I'm always looking for live BPs.
Yeah.
And so I'll take groups.
That's where.
Yeah, whoever those hitting groups are that are hitting those live BPs, that group that's not at the plate, I'll take a group out to first base.
Perfect.
Those steel breaks. I'll grab a group of guys and just go watch a bullpen. When these pitchers, we got 1 million pitchers, and they're throwing bullpens every day. They're throwing side sessions. Yeah. And we'll just, when they start going from the set, we'll time them up and that kind of thing. Technology is really, really helpful as well. You can get clips, footage of pitchers and throw them up on the big screen, or you can take them on an iPad and just put it on the ground in front of the guys. And, have 5 deliveries in a row that are consistent and mix in one with a little bit of a hold. You can make it as hard or as easy as you want to. What I always do is try to make it really, really easy at the start to add challenge so they get used to the different things that can happen in a game. And then right before their season start, go back into confidence building mode. So they ideally leave spring training with some confidence that they can pull this off.
Fantastic. Love it, Kev, man. I kept you too long. And what I'm going to do is going to look at the ABCA video again. If you're an ABCA member, remember our international coaches, you're getting all the videos starting from 2008, just to be a member. If you don't join, it's crazy because you're getting all this education for like $75. Remember, so go to abca.org. What we're going to do is look at your presentation at the ABCA, encourage that. I'm going to send emails out to coaches to ask questions. So we're going to come back for the second show with a lot more questions, not only from coaches, but from what we've seen at the ABCA. And we'll have some fun doing that. I can't thank you enough, buddy. That's been great.
Pete, it's been a highlight for me just meeting you and making the connection. Because again, I've known who you are on social media, and I've admired from afar what you do for the game of baseball. I think it's really special. And I'm glad to make the personal connection and make a new friend.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And matter of fact, I would have been in Arizona, by the way, because that's where I wanted to go. But it was in the heat of, the market, the housing market, and things were crazy. We put a bid on probably 5 to 10 places, got out. I don't have that much money. I got outbid all the time. Otherwise, Arizona was my place. I would have came and watched there every day, man. That would have been fantastic.
We talked earlier about going where the opportunities are, right?
Yep.
We've actually never owned a home.
Wow.
So everywhere we've been, we've had leases and rented or lived on school campuses or in dorms or whatever.
Well, I got a feeling, I don't know, just a gut feeling that soon here, one of these next few years, you might have to buy a home in Chicago. I just have that feeling. I don't know why. But thanks, buddy, man. This has been awesome. You've been fantastic. I gotta tell you, it was great.
Yep, a lot of fun, man. We'll catch up and we'll to be continued.
All right, sounds good, folks. Kevin Graber, Chicago Cubs minor league field coordinator, also base running coach. Fantastic show. Thanks, Kevin, and we will see you, folks. Don't forget, join us. We're going to be live also next week, and we'll have a special guest next week. We're not going to tell you who that is because we want you to join us. Remember, this is a show that loves to interview baseball's best coaching minds who love to challenge the status quo. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you. And we will see you on the next show. Bye-bye, everybody.